Welcome to the Moved to Meditate podcast. I'm your host, Addie D. Hilster. This is a place for vibrant discussions about mindfulness, movement practices, and ways to find more balance and presence in daily life. Here you'll find resources to help you progress on your path, as well as insightful conversations with mindful movement, yoga, meditation, and Dharma teachers from a range of traditions. On this podcast, we spotlight embodied approaches to mindfulness and the more contemplative aspects of movement practice. Listen in and connect to a community of like-minded practitioners. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 92 of the podcast. Today, I'm going to share with you a short excerpt from the book I'm writing. The working title of my book is Teaching Mindful Movement, and this is a section about somatics from the chapter that goes over the different movement modalities I like to include in my practice and my teaching. I'm going to, for this episode, pretend that I'm an audiobook narrator and try to simply read this to you without editorializing, which might be kind of hard for me because I like to add my side commentary, but in the interest of clarity, I'm just going to restrain myself today. So in this excerpt, you will hear some interesting background on the field of somatics, where it came from, and who the major figures are. I found this pretty intriguing when I did some research on this because I didn't know necessarily about all of these figures and all of these connections with somatics and Eastern contemplative traditions, or the way the somatics field was shaped by the 1960s experimental vibe and the big meeting of cultures and ideas that was going on then. So I just touch on this briefly in the book and in this excerpt, but it might get you interested to do a little more digging, especially in light of some of the efforts today to decolonize somatic practices and investigate where implicit biases may have embedded in their development. If you check the show notes page on my website, I'll have some resources there for additional reading for any piece of this that might have sparked your interest. Speaking of the book, since I've been trying to make more time for writing and putting the book together, I'm podcasting a little bit less frequently right now, but I'm still here. I am trying to show up with 2 episodes a month right now. So while you won't see me every single week here, I do have some really fun interviews and crossovers and plans with fellow podcasters coming up really soon. So stay tuned for those in the near future. I also have a cool event to quickly tell you about before I do read you this book excerpt. So some of the graduates of the last cohort of my mindful movement teacher training, at the end of the program, they were asking for more opportunities to stay connected with each other. So that has inspired a new series of teacher masterclasses that I'll be offering about every other month. It's for these MMTT alumni, but I also wanted to open it to a wider circle. So it's open to anyone who teaches movement, teaches yoga or meditation, or who's interested in getting into these fields. I have wanted to do something like this for a while because there aren't a lot of places to connect with fellow teachers, really, to just share ideas and ask our questions and share our challenges and triumphs. So this is totally donation-based. It's casual. There's no membership you have to join or anything complicated about it. I think we'll have attendees of all different experience levels, which will be really cool to just be learning from each other. And hopefully some of the alumni of the trainings that I've led either online or back at my studio will be part of it too. We'll be meeting on Zoom for 90 minutes, and sometimes in these teacher masterclasses, I'll give a little presentation, and other times we'll have a guest speaker. There will be time as well to connect with each other and sometimes to maybe do a short practice. So our first meetup is May 4th this weekend. So if you're hearing this in time, join us. If it's too late to make that one work, go to my website and check for the future dates. I do have the meetings scheduled out through the end of this year. And you can find all of this info at movedtomeditate.yoga/teacher-masterclasses. Or just go to the show notes page for this episode and I'll have a link there too. Okay, thank you so much for listening today and allowing me to share this little bit of my work in progress book with you. And if you have feedback to share after hearing this section of the book, I welcome you to email me. I would love to know what you found intriguing or confusing, or if you think of something related to somatics that I left out and I should consider including in this section. I'm really open to hearing those ideas. There's an email form on the contact page of my website, or you can reach me directly at mail@movedtomeditate.com. So either way will totally work. Okay, let's hear this excerpt from the book. Excerpt from Teaching Mindful Movement in Part 2, Frameworks and Foundations, Movement Modalities. Somatics. The word somatic is derived from the Greek word soma, which means of the body. Somatics is an umbrella term for a field of body-based practices that were adopted, developed, and synthesized by European and North American practitioners, beginning with the post-World War II generation. Perhaps the strongest unifying characteristic among somatic modalities is an emphasis upon the awareness of internal sensations. Marked by the horrors of the Second World War, the early pioneers in the field of somatics, like Elsa Gendler and Charlotte Selver, both born in Germany, often saw their work as a way of healing individuals, finding lost humanity, and reshaping society. The movement was both an influence on and influenced by 1960s counterculture, and it also intertwined with the introduction of Eastern philosophy, Buddhism, and yoga to Western culture. One example of this cultural mingling is documented in Sandy Boucher's book, Dancing in the Dharma, about well-known Vipassana teacher Ruth Denison. She writes about the spiritual intellectual salons held at Henry and Ruth Denison's home in the Hollywood Hills, and how their social circle and teachers included figures like Erich Fromm, Aldous Huxley, Timothy Leary, Alan Watts, Joshu Sasaki Roshi, Maezumi Roshi, Uba Kien, and somatics pioneer Charlotte Selver. The Esalen Institute, a retreat center on the spectacular central coast of Big Sur, California, was also a major home for this developing field, hosting workshops that connected the leading somatic thinkers with seekers and students. In addition to somatic movement practices, this field was also fertile ground for the development of body-based psychotherapies. Eugene Gendlin, who developed the focusing technique and coined the phrase felt sense, is considered part of this lineage. Another example would be Peter Levine's somatic experiencing, a body-based trauma therapy, which many also use for everyday nervous system regulation. There are also hands-on bodywork modalities that have come out of the somatics lineage, such as Rolfing and craniosacral therapy, as well as breathwork techniques, therapeutic dance methods such as Laban Bartnieff movement studies, continuum, dance movement therapy, and more. In terms of somatic movement practices, a few of the best known are Alexander Technique, founded by F. Matthias Alexander, Hanna Somatics, founded by Thomas Hanna, Awareness Through Movement, founded by Moshe Feldenkrais, and Body-Mind Centering, founded by Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. Some of these schools of movement are more concerned with ideal postural alignment or corrective exercise, while others are more exploratory and less prescriptive. It is important to note that there have also been critiques of the somatics field and the historical narrative that it constructed for itself, claiming a lineage that descended from ancient Greek ideas about the body. Some researchers argue that the founders of the field of somatics drew from many multicultural inspirations, but essentially whitewashed those traditional body practices, filtering them through a Eurocentric lens. In parallel with those criticisms of the field, innovative practitioners have also begun to use the tools of somatics as a way of investigating how our society's harmful biases are internalized and held in our bodies. Therapist and trauma specialist Resmaa Menakem is one of the leading voices of this movement, creating methodologies for healing racialized trauma through embodied inquiry. Somatics and mindful movement. Many somatic practices complement mindfulness meditation since they cultivate curiosity, exploration, and greater awareness of the body. In particular, I have found Feldenkrais lessons and Hatha somatics exercises to be a wonderful opportunity to slow down and attune to subtler embodied experiences. These practices tend to shy away from the larger movements and stronger sensations you might stimulate in a yoga session, instead encouraging you to notice tiny micro movements and subtle signals from the body. With practice, you start to appreciate how these easy to overlook gestures are often the building blocks of more complex patterns. Imagine lying on the floor and repeating a small tip of the pelvis towards your left. You could discover what muscles are engaging, how your feet are participating, what parts of your spine are ready to turn, and more. Gradually adding layers to a simple movement like this, now a gentle arm reach, now a little head turn, you might be surprised to find yourself in an effortless full twist by the end of class. These small but potent explorations can also help you pinpoint areas of tension and begin to unwind those patterns at a deeper level. Since Hatha somatics exercises often work through methods of gently engaging or contracting specific areas, then deliberately and thoroughly melting that muscular engagement, they can help us understand cycles of contraction and conscious release. We can physically practice letting go. This soft, slow practice can also be very calming and downregulating for the nervous system and help to untangle or reprogram habitual holding patterns of body-mind. Somatic exercise can be its own distinct movement practice. You can do a full session of Hatha somatics or attend a Feldenkrais class. Or somatic explorations can easily be folded into other yoga, Pilates, or mindful movement sessions. Somatic style movements were incorporated into some of my earlier yoga training without necessarily being named as such. My teachers, particularly Leanne Carey, Ann Cushman, and Janice Gates, were influenced by their yoga teachers, including Donna Farhi, Eric Schiffman, and Angela Farmer, who all experimented with more free-form, intuitive, sensory-based methods. Some were also inspired by somatic pioneers like Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, and in their teaching used such exercises to help us bring a more curious, exploratory spirit into the classical yoga asanas. These days, I often use somatic movements as part of the warm-up in a yoga or mindful movement class as a way of connecting to a specific part of the body or preparing the foundational gestures that will culminate in a more complex pose. My interest in somatics deepened during a phase in my practice when I was sensing a disconnect between the deep and detailed way I could feel my body in the stillness of meditation versus what I could feel in my body during an active yoga practice. Slowing down with these simplified movements allowed me to find a new subtlety in movement and to include more than just the strongest, most obvious sensations in my awareness. In other words, somatics helped me connect the sensory dots or form a bridge between meditation and movement. I've also leaned into gentle somatic movements at times when I had very little energy for a more active practice. Most Hatha somatics exercises and Feldenkrais lessons are done lying down and can even be done in a bed if needed. It can be a way of engaging with the body without draining your energy and leaving yourself fatigued. Somatic exercises can also be very useful for people who have pain and fear that a movement practice may cause a flare-up. Somatic movements can start very small and offer a non-threatening way to explore around the affected area. These practices work gently with the nervous system, developing a sense of confidence and tolerance for movement by allowing sensations to be very gradually titrated. Overall, somatics offers a subtle way of working with the body which helps refine our attention so we can learn to sustain our awareness on things that are quieter and less dramatic. This skill translates directly into mindfulness meditation practice, where we are asked to stay present without actively stimulating sensation, to be with the breath just as it is, for example. Through this process, we learn to see our experience more deeply, more clearly, and with less reactivity. Okay, that's the excerpt. Thank you so much for listening. And as I mentioned before, there will be some resources on the show notes page on the website at movedtomeditate.yoga/podcast. And I absolutely welcome your feedback and thoughts about this little bit from what I've been writing. Okay, have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for being here. So that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend, subscribe on YouTube, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and help others find it that way. To learn more about my work, the Moved to Meditate class library, courses, or teacher trainings, go to movedtomeditate.yoga. This is Addie D. Hilster. Thanks so much for listening.